Hi, I'm Amelia from Leader Logic, and this episode is part of a new series called Engineers Can't Trust Anything. Now, that's not just me being cynical. This is a very real fact of engineering. You need to be so careful that the information that you're using is fit for purpose. So why am I talking about this? Because it has been a very long, hard lesson for me to learn. I'm hoping that anyone who watches this will learn from my experiences, take off the rose-tinted glasses and think critically about the information that's being given to them. In this series, we're going to talk about the different sources of information that you'll regularly come across when you're doing designs and look at the different ways that these might contain inaccuracies, and also talk about strategies on how to address some of these inaccuracies. In today's episode, we're starting with data. For this example, we'll use a hypothetical data set where we're measuring temperature in a process. It doesn't matter particularly what the process is. Based on this data set, you can see we have an average of 12.6 degrees, a minimum of 0 degrees, and a maximum of 22. Now, this represents what we would have calculated if we just took the raw data as it was given to us and analysed it, basically just using Excel and doing average, minimum, maximum. But taking a closer look at this trend, you can see that there's something unusual. First, look at these high temperatures. They all stop at exactly 22 degrees. In one instance, the data is stuck at 22 for several days in a row. Now, that's very unusual given that the data set does not have any of these other flat lines except at 0. More than likely, this is a limitation of the temperature sensing instrument, and the values above 22 are simply being replaced in the data by the upper limit of measurement. Because of this, your maximum temperature and your average temperature calculations are probably incorrect, but there are a number of ways that you can try to solve this. First, you can check whether there's any other process data that's being collected that correlates really well with temperature. And one might be if you're measuring the density of a liquid at some other point nearby. Maybe you can find a correlation between temperature and density and then use the density values to work out what those corresponding maximum temperatures might have been. Another way you can solve this that takes a little bit longer is to actually install another temperature sensor and collect more data. For now, let's assume that you found a way to back calculate the temperatures during those periods where they were capped at 22 degrees. And so this next set of data shows the updated data set with the corrected temperatures. Your data set looks a lot better now, and your average and your maximum calculated values have increased. But there are still a lot of 0 values. This seems unlikely because look at the other temperatures in the range. They're all a lot higher. There's none in the 1 degree, 2 degree, 3 degree range. So it's quite a leap from your existing temperatures down to 0. So it's unlikely that the zeros are actually a measurement of temperature. It's actually much more likely that the temperature sensor or the process or plant itself was offline, and so there were no measurements being recorded. Another possibility is that the data depended on an operator looking at the reading on the sensor and writing it down, and there were some days that they just didn't do it. And so when the blank spaces in their log were converted into data, the blank spaces were converted into zeros. Another possibility is that there were actually quite low temperatures at this time, but because the temperatures make some element of the production process difficult, the plant was switched off at this point in time, and so the low temperatures simply weren't recorded. Whatever the reason, this absence of data in the low temperature range is causing your average temperature and your minimum temperatures to be inaccurate. In the same way that you had to address the issue at the top end of the range, you also need to address these issues at the bottom end of the range. And again, it could be as simple as back calculating, or you might need to install the analyzer. With this data set that's been corrected a second time, we can see that it's looking a lot more reasonable. we've got minimum, average and maximum values that all look pretty reasonable, and we've got a trend that seems reasonably consistent with no gaps in it and with no significant outliers. But you still can't be sure that this data represents the whole truth and nothing but the truth. For example, make sure that the temperature measurement is actually located at the point that you need it to be to give you an accurate indication of the temperature that you need. What can sometimes happen is that the temperature sensor is located at one point, but you're making design decisions on something further downstream, and the temperature may have changed. There may be mixing of a warm stream and a cold stream, or it could be that your temperature sensor is located closer to one than the other, and so it's not actually giving you the final mix temperature, whereas if it was 2 meters further down the pipe, you would get more of a consistent result. You can only know these types of things by visiting the site and seeing exactly where the sensor is relative to the data that you need to make your decisions. Other problems can be things like the data taken down manually by the operators was misread when it was being transcribed into a spreadsheet. It could also be that the spreadsheet was just compiled inaccurately. It could be that records were falsified. It could be that the sensor malfunctioned. It could also be that everything was done right from an operational point of view, but the sensor wasn't maintained regularly, and so it drifted off its calibration. As you can see, an engineer can't simply accept the data that they're given as being accurate. They need to think critically about all the ways that inaccuracies might have crept into that data, and they also need to think about the appropriateness of the data to the design decisions that they're intending to make. Let me know in the comments if this was helpful, and also let me know if you've got any examples where data has been assumed to be correct and then found later not to be incorrect, and how that's played out in terms of affecting the design. Please also like this video by hitting the thumbs up, subscribe to Leader Logic, and hit the bell for notification when new episodes come out. Thanks for watching another episode of Leader Logic, and have a lovely day.